NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is wading into the WNBA's CBA negotiation yet again, and it's doing much more harm than good. So much so that it feels like a strike might be on the horizon. Let's talk about it. And what is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to No Cap Space WBB. It's Andrew Hobner. Happy to be with you. Happy you are here with us. Apologize for a little bit of the radio silence recently. It has been a long WNBA season, and with the NCAA season coming in just a little bit, we decided our crew needed a little bit of a break to just a few days to kind of recharge and reset and get ready. We have a bunch of really great projects and new things coming in the college basketball season, so you're going to want to get very excited about it. Consider joining our Substack or subscribing to the newsletter. Consider becoming a YouTube member for just a few bucks a month. Get access to our Discord chat, as well as early access to luxury tax interviews and some more interesting subscriber-only videos that we are going to be rolling out here in the next couple of months. And as always, use code NOCAP15 to get 15% off your first home field purchase. In the description, we have a link to the No Cap Space WBB collection, which is a curated collection from yours truly and your friends at NCS. Over at Home Field, basically, we took all their best women's basketball merch and put it into one place so you can find it as the college season starts. Nobody does college better than Home Field, so make sure you use that code NOCAP15 for 15% off your first order. Now, I know it's been a little while. I know people have been waiting to hear the opinions that we have on these kinds of things, so let's talk a little bit of basketball here. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner has stepped in it yet again, I think is probably the fairest way to assess this. Because ultimately, the issue here is Adam Silver doesn't really seem to believe that these women are worthy of getting paid in legitimate sums. So the headline in ESPN, this is from yesterday, Alexa Philippou saying WNBA players can expect big increase in salaries from Adam Silver, but it also belies what the quote actually is in it and was. So this question came up because this was being discussed during the NBA on NBC's return. Adam Silver, the league commissioner, was on the Today Show yesterday and was asked about the WNBA. In it, he says, quote, I think share isn't the right way to look at it. That is in terms of revenue sharing for women's basketball players, mind you. I think share isn't the right way to look at it because there's so much more revenue in the NBA, Silver said on the Today Show. I think you should look at absolute numbers in terms of what they are making. They're going to get a big increase in this cycle of collective bargaining, and they deserve it. Woo, buddy. Selling the clip up front. I mean, that's really what is remarkable about this, is that Adam Silver is basically laying out the WNBA's bargaining and negotiating position on Front Street here. And basically what he's saying is that tying revenues to revenue shares is something that they don't want to do in the WNBA. Because what this is telling me, what this quote tells me is this is fixed. He wants a fixed salary increase for the life of the deal, as opposed to a revenue share, which can theoretically bump the player's basketball-related income up no matter what happens. Year over year, if the league makes more money, the players are going to make more money too. This doesn't surprise me at all that this is the tack of Adam Silver. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody in corporate America right now who has any interest in rev share with their employees. Working in the TV world, in local television, I can tell you this right here is exactly what people face in our industry all the time. The minute I was told this from a really, really seasoned and quality journalist years and years ago when I first came into this business, but I was once told that the minute you are undervalued in a contract is the second after you sign it. Because no matter what, your value over the life of a contract is going to increase regardless. Because when you first come into a job, if you're on a 2-year deal, for instance, you are not going to be pegged to anything, right? You have not given the station or the network any value just yet. So technically you are you're being paid to be there. But the minute you start making money for your station or making money for your network, you become underpaid because you don't see a share of that profit. If you pitch a new show in local television and sales is able to make, $100,000 on a sponsorship for it, you as the showrunner, reporter, producer, you don't see that money. You don't see any commission on it. The salesperson does. And it's a win for the station, but it's not a win for you because the minute you go into the contract negotiation, you're arguing fixed rates again. And that is what it seems like Adam Silver wants here in the WNBA, is because you can make out a lot better when you are, a member of the capital and ownership class when you have fixed salaries, because if you make 3 times the money and the salary growth is pegged to making 5% a year more annually, then who gets more of that money? The company does, the franchise does, the league does. This is really, it shouldn't shock anyone that this is the tack he wants to take, because this is literally what we have seen statistically in corporate America, where executive executive salaries have risen exponentially, corporate profits have risen exponentially, but actual day-to-day wages have barely increased over the life of the last 40 years. And that's what the WNBA wants to emulate here, and what the NBA wants to emulate here, because it's gone pretty well for the ownership class that's what they do, right? And so this is something to me that I'll get to why I think this quote is important in just a second. We'll continue on. The WNBPA opted out of the current CBA a year ago this week and has been negotiating a new one. It expires in less than 2 weeks on October 31st. So basically what that says is that if by Halloween there isn't an agreement and they don't agree on an extension to negotiate, we're in a work stoppage. On an Instagram story, the WNBPA said, don't want to share, ? Which is funny. A big holdup in negotiations, players have said, has been the different ways each side believes player salaries should be determined. Amid a tremendous growth for league, players are pushing for a system in which the percentage of revenue that goes towards salaries grows with the business, more akin to the NBA, where it's determined by BRI, with players taking in about half that is marked and dictated by their CBA. Players say the league proposals have featured a salary cap that increases by a fixed rate over time, as it is in the current CBA, where the cap increases by 3% annually. So just what I told you. That right there is exactly what corporate America is doing right now outside of these sports-related industries. And sports is unique, and the reason why I've been banging the drum for a few weeks is about this negotiation being bigger than just the basketball and being bigger than the sports. Is this is a normal person problem. That's a normal person problem. I have this problem. You have this problem. This is not a scenario, and this is what makes this, labor battle so unique, and why I feel like the NBA is just being, if anybody is making this personal, it's the NBA and WNBA ownership, because this is clearly, this is not good business. This is clearly not good business. This is a show of strength about where the power lies in the hierarchy of society. Because this is what all of us deal with in our day-to-day lives. Unless you're on a commission job, and even then there's problems there, because if you're like a pure 1099, 100% commission person, you're also kind of getting the shaft, because even if you sell a lot, you still don't have you still don't have a base or health insurance, right? For those that are W-2 employees, this is the problem. This right here is the problem. Because say it increases by a fixed rate over time. Even if you have a 10% fixed rate increase year over year with the salary cap, if the league's revenues increase 30%, then that 10% isn't shared well anymore, right? 20% of that is going up as opposed to going sideways, which it should, profit should go sideways to the labor, not up to the management class. And that is what is happening here. Is the NBA and the WNBA are effectively saying, if we make more money, you'll get some, but you're not entitled to more. Now, the thing that is interesting to me, and I want to be very clear before I go back into the OTS, because I want to make sure that people are aware of this, because I saw a comment on Reddit about this recently, and I feel like I have to really make mention of this. When I posit a theory about the NBA's ownership of the WNBA, it is done through conversations I've had with people that have been involved in labor negotiations, conversations I've had with people in the league, conversations I've had with people adjacent to the league, like agents or development coaches, former players, etc. It's, being in journalism for 10 plus years now in sports, in general assignment. I've done everything, in the journalism world from a news and sports perspective. And my general worldview and what I've seen in my life. Like, those are the three main pillars in which I will base knowledge on for a theory, right? So when I say something like, I believe the WNBA has an aspect to it where it's a shell game for the NBA to park bad assets, and that's why they're so cagey about revealing finances, because if they were to actually open up the books, you would be able to look inside and see that there's some things in there that should not be there. That is not a statement of true fact, because I have not seen the books. It is a theory that I hold, and one that I believe based on the information that has been given to me from people that I trust and from sourcing and reporting. But I saw a comment the other day that referenced the videos that we make and said the WNBA is a place where the NBA is parking shitty assets. And I want to be very clear in these videos, because I know how YouTube works. I know how the modern media ecosystem works. And, if I have to poo-poo this and, it means that we lose a few thousand, views because it's not riling people up the way the algorithm dictates, we'll eat that, because I'm not somebody that likes to just kind of throw out certainties. I believe fervently that the NBA has some shit to hide on their WNBA books. I really do believe that, because if there was not that issue, they would not be so cagey about it. Because to the best of my knowledge, when the WNBA and WNBPA are working to try and figure out if they hit these revenue benchmarks that would trigger the revenue sharing, my understanding is they're not actually sitting down there and auditing that the way the NBA does. And if you listen to our episode with Tamika Tremalio, the former NBPA executive director, where we talked about the labor negotiation and fight, Tamika told me that the revenue share for basketball-related income, BRI, and this is called in the NBA, that stuff is audited every year. So representatives from the PA and representatives from the NBA will get down, sit at a table, and they will audit the NBA's books and fight over what is and is not basketball-related income. The NBA will fight and say, well, this line item is not basketball-related income, thus it is not subject to the revenue share for the players. So, if we make $200,000 on a sponsorship, the league will try to argue to the players that's not BRI, because they don't want to give $100,000 of the $200,000 over to the players. And the PA will go back to them and say, this is BRI, they deserve a share of that revenue. My understanding of it is that the NBA or the WNBA doesn't even have a mechanism to open the books and negotiate it with this stuff. My understanding is the WNBA says to the PA, you didn't trigger the benchmark that you need to open this, and thus it's just going to stay there. And to me, I think the reason that I wanted to kind of have that longer preamble is because I believe and I feel that they are fighting so hard over fixed salaries because they don't want to do the audits. Now, is that a fact? No. Could Adam Silver watch this video and come back and be like, that Andrew Hobner, he doesn't know a damn thing, he doesn't know his ass from his elbow? Sure. But everything that I've seen, everything that I've read and covered and talked with people, all of that reporting journalistically goes into why I posit this theory. And even though it's still a theory, by saying you are arguing for fixed salaries is not necessarily beating the allegations. You're not beating the allegations here that you are cool with your books being open, and this is, Satu Sabli, for whatever people think about Satu Sabli, she is on point when it comes to labor negotiations and discussions. But as she said, if we continue with the CBA, percentage-wise, it would go down on our compensation, which is correct. If you have a fixed salary, you will ultimately make less of a percentage of the revenue if the revenue is skyrocketing in the way that it is. And all of the money, I mean, we saw it even this morning. Robin Roberts was named as one of 3 new owners of the New York Liberty, bought equity stakes in with 2 other people for a franchise valued at $450 million. It's a $500 million franchise. So again, there should be no reason to be so cagey about rev share. And that's what's hard to get back here. Kathy Engelbert said that's what we're kind of going back and forth, determining where the right balance is. I think we all agree we're trying to return every dollar we possibly can to the players. No, you're not. But we also want to incentivize investment from owners. We want owners to have a viable business. Obviously, we're looking at expansion of up to 18 teams by the end of the decade. So it's important that those owners coming in have a shot at a viable economic model for the future. This argument would hold a lot more water if you didn't just spend the last year letting NBA owners whose finances were vetted by the NBA cut the line to get ownership. This argument would have made a lot more sense if you brought in Austin and Nashville and other non-NBA affiliated, Charlotte, like other non-NBA affiliated franchises where you have had to go through the trouble of vetting these people for yourself, but you are still wondering whether or not, it's going to pan out in the way that it is supposed to. The issue that I have is you're making an argument for owners that have no problem paying the luxury tax and no problem paying for new facilities and no problem keeping up with the Joneses in the NBA, the league that Adam Silver says makes so much more money than the W. And yet you're in here trying to cry broke for people that you let cut the line on the basis of the fact that you knew they were billionaires in the first place. So this is just blatant nonsense. It's nonsense because the reason you brought those people in is because of their financial solvency, because they already have facilities, because they already have arenas. So much of their upfront overhead's already taken care of. Now they just got to pay the players. So you got to miss me with this, because an owner is especially a dual owner, right? A Joe Tsai is taking a rev share cut from the NBA's TV deal and the WNBA's TV deal. He's double dipping. So he's not broke here. Dan Gilbert is not broke. The Gore family is not broke. Gore's family is not broke. So I think this is just completely ridiculous. And then, we see the clapback that happened this morning, and that it came in the form of Terry Jackson from the WNBPA. And let me find, here we go. Terry Jackson, the WNBPA executive director. When the players opted out a year ago, they made it clear they wanted a salary system that values their labor and allows them to grow with the business they are clearly driving. The league's response has been to run out the clock, put lipstick on a pig, great quote, and retread a system that isn't tied to any part of the business and intentionally undervalues the players. The fact that the league now wants to call any part of its proposal uncapped is precisely why its leadership, transparency, and accountability are being challenged right now. Adam Silver said it himself on behalf of the WNBA, share isn't the word. It's not in their vocabulary. I will say this. For those that really have an issue with the WNBPA and how they conducted themselves last year, and believe me, there were a lot of things you could criticize them on last year. They've handled this year great. This entire labor negotiation's been handled great. And I personally, I think beyond the structural circumstances, which make it a lot easier to back the players on this, I think they have done a wonderful job giving the NBA and WNBA ownership and leadership plenty of rope to hang themselves on stupid public statements, especially at a time when, regardless of what your politics are, right or left, I think there is a bipartisan frustration on the just simple worker economics here. And the WNBA's battle is going to be a really interesting thing, in terms of public perception, to see what people value more. Like, do they value being misogynistic and racist towards women of color and queer women more than they do what their economic feelings are? And based on what people like Dave Portnoy are putting out there, the economics is winning out here. And that's kind of rare that, that's happened in America in the last 5-10 years. It feels like people's allegiances and adherence to culture war politics has superseded any type of like sheer discussion or value of solidarity around working class economics. And yet here we are with a lot of people on the player's side here because everyone sees the familiarity in this. And that's kind of what I would come back to is the idea that this is not a set of players that are arguing, I make 5 million already, I want to make 20. These are rookies that are making like 75, $80,000 living in places like San Francisco, New York, Seattle, LA. And go ask people that make that kind of money there. Like, that's a firmly middle class salary in a place like that, especially given how expensive everything is. And so the battle that these players are fighting is a lot more familiar to normal working class people. And when I say working class, I don't mean like, a person making $15 an hour at Taco Bell. I'm talking about a mid-level bank, mid-level analysts at a bank. Like, I'm talking about a person that works in Market 18 and in local TV. I'm talking about folks that are in, white collar jobs or high end blue collar jobs where, you're making anywhere between like 70 and 110 a year. And I'd wager that's probably a lot. I mean, you could probably say like even down to 50 or 60 on the low end if you're living in places that are more cost affordable. But the point is, everybody understands that this is an issue of like what you would define as middle class individuals clearly seeing that they are making a ton of money and deserve a cut of what is a venture that they should be rewarded for because they produce the value and the labor for it. So that to me, I think is it's interesting that the NBA and the WNBA are this committed to dying on the rev share and salaries angle, because again, nobody seems to be asking the important question. And I don't think Craig Melvin at NBC is the person that's going to ask that, to be clear. But no one's asked the question of Kathy Engelbert and Adam Silver, like, do you open your books? What is the process of you opening your books? And are you trying to get away from an audit concept if you do not? Because if you're trying to get away from the audit concept, then the question easily becomes, what are you hiding? And the NBA, it costs absolutely nothing to open the books and say, look, the league doesn't make a lot of money. And that to me should be the tell for people. If this league didn't make money or didn't make money in the way they thought, it would be out there. Teams would be they would be publishing their finances if it were this bad. But I mean, I can tell you in the last year, that stuff has pretty much disintegrated. I had a source tell me recently that 2024 was the first year the Chicago Sky was profitable. So after not turning a profit for nearly 20 years as a franchise, in Angel Reese's rookie year, they did. Now, it wasn't a massive profit, I've been told, but it was a profit, and that was different. Now, the league, can argue and say it has never turned a profit, as a whole. Individual franchises have, though. I mean, there are other more moneyed and more successful franchises than the Sky that have been turning profits for years. But it is something of note that the one franchise that you could argue is probably one of the three lowest profit potential franchises did cross that Rubicon this past year. Now nobody has an argument to make. And now you're in a position where what exactly are you going to do with that piece of it? So I am very interested to see where we end up going with this kind of thing, because it feels like we're headed to a strike. I mean, the players very clearly know that they have the leverage here. And it feels that the personal stuff is actually coming from the NBA and WNBA ownership and management side. It's giving hardball negotiation tactics, and that's fine. But there's a lack of respect here too. Adam Silver saying this is personal feels very coded towards like women can't do business properly. And then for Adam Silver to come out, mind you, and say that he views the NBA as a media and technology company instead of a basketball product is a really interesting window into how he and clearly the owners that bankroll him as the commissioner feel. And it makes sense that if he feels that way, that's why Kathy Engelbert came in from Deloitte when she first took over the league. These aren't basketball people that are leading this thing anymore. And it's really interesting, this idea of pro sports leagues kind of becoming too big to fail entities on their own, because I don't know about the WNBA, but the NBA and the MLB and NFL, there's a ton of proprietary tech that they own that makes them a lot of money. There's advances that all of these leagues have quietly made that are able to be sold, either on subscription or, to teams or as a resource. I mean, that's Second Spectrum isn't publicly available, but I mean, you can still find a way to access Second Spectrum. But that is something that, while not necessarily like a proprietary creation of the NBA, there's stuff that they use for their advanced analytics that is proprietary, that, certain types of code or things that these leagues build out to help within their own operations are things that can eventually be used to go back out into the public sector and, or back out in the private sector, excuse me, and make you a little bit of money. So the fact that the league doesn't seem to prioritize the sport anymore tells me that they find the sport to be ancillary to what they are trying to sell to people. And I don't think sports fans are ready to reckon with that just yet. Because that basically at that point you're saying like none of this ultimately matters. And while we do know that there's a bread and circuses aspect to sports in some way, shape, or form, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to strip it all away in the face of just complete unchecked mask off capitalism. And people are clearly getting tired of it. And I think that's a part of why the WNBA players side is getting such a boost of popularity here is I think people just want to see a win for what we would define as working class in anything. I mean, these players are asking to be paid what they're worth, and they should, and they deserve to be paid what they're worth. If you're a true anti-capitalist, and I wouldn't say I'm like a fervent, tried and true, like break it all down. I think capitalism is good with a lot of guardrails in check and a national consensus and belief around the fact that moral guardrails are vital to the stabilization of a society that indulges in capitalistic tendencies like that. Like I know people would be like, well, you're just creating another millionaire class if you end up, with this CBA. It's like, yeah, well, that's kind of how this should work. Like people that make the money should be able to get the money. And even though it might create another class of upper class individuals that can be further detached from society down the road, I think people are just desperate to see a win for labor of any kind right now. And this constitutes the out of touchness of, higher end corporate class and, this detachment of like something like stock market and economy, where the NBA is looking at the investments and the things that exist almost within their own economy right now. And then the stuff that's actually happening on the ground in like terms of the day to day, where you have players that are like, I am having trouble affording to live in a city because I'm on a rookie scale deal or I'm someone that bounces around the league all the time. Like those people need some type of security and stability in this too. And that to me is where the fight really is. But it feels like the league and the owners are dying to have any reason at all to just dig in their heels and say, F it, F you, we don't care. Stay in your lane, know your place, and, come to the table because we think you should. And I think they're messing with the wrong type of people when it comes to that. And it just is one more show this week that Adam Silver, Kathy Engelbert, they just don't get what they're doing. They don't realize what they're fighting here. They don't know the leverage that they're fighting against. The WNBA does not have the brand equity of the NBA. So if Unrivaled were to be the 5-on-5 overflow league, I don't think people would really care all that much that you're losing the Minnesota Lynx and you're getting the Lunar Owls instead. I think people just want to watch Nafisa Collier and Asia Wilson and Caitlin Clark. I don't think people have an issue with that. Now, the Nike side of this is interesting, and I'll put that in a different video, but it is kind of noteworthy to see the Nike athletes, Sabrina Ionescu, going and doing events with Adam Silver in the middle of this. Caitlin Clark being relatively mum on the entirety of the labor fight. Not that it's her responsibility to do that. Asia Wilson going out, even though she did have a comment in support of Nafisa Collier's comments against Kathy Engelbert, came out earlier this past summer and said, I hope it doesn't go to a strike. And granted, that was a little earlier in the process, but I do find it noteworthy that the Nike athletes, and Nike is, the supplier for NBA and WNBA apparel, and Nike has a really close relationship with the league. It's interesting that the Nike athletes are not the ones that are leading the charge here. And it's like the Adidas and the Reebok athletes that are really kind of stepping up in a way that the Nike ones are not. And I gotta do a little bit more digging into that as a reporter, because that's more of like a half-baked theory that doesn't, I think, carry as much weight as the theory about the NBA's caginess to audit its own finances for the W. But there is like a Nike element here that I'm interested in exploring a little more as well. But that's all the time we got. Trying to keep this to 30. I know it's been a little while, so consider this a little bit of a mini pod for people. And if you want to be along with us throughout the labor fight, if you want to be on with us through the NCAA season, consider a subscription this week and next. Our NCAA previews and conference previews will start next Monday. Like I said, we're just kind of keeping it a little light, catching our breath. We don't get a lot of breaks in women's basketball world. So the literal 2 weeks that we get between NCAA and WNBA and WNBA and NCAA, we try to take them where we can to make sure that burnout doesn't hit. So consider joining us on YouTube. Consider joining us on the newsletter side of things. Join our Discord chat when you subscribe, and stay with us, man. Subscribe, like, share, do all your things, because we got some great things coming up here sometime soon, and can't wait to share them with you when they do come. But until then, we'll see y'all very, very soon.